Space, the final frontier.
These are the voyages of the man-made moon Sputnik. The launch of Sputnik marked the opening of space to human exploration. Space was and is the final frontier because, throughout most of our time in history, we have only been able to look up. It has only been a short time since we have been able to travel into space. Now, with our advanced technologies that stem from the space race, we can look further into the galaxy than ever before. However, none of our exploration of our solar system, our galaxy, and our universe would have been as rapidly developed if not for a small, beeping aluminum ball. Historians and scientists agree that on October 4th, 1957, the space race started with the launch of Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, into low Earth orbit, completing a circuit of the Earth every 96 minutes and emitting a steady beeping, where it stayed for 3 months before disintegrating in the atmosphere as it crashed back to Earth. At the time of Sputnik's launch, not only did it open the door to space, but it also caused fear in the general public of the U.S. of becoming a second-rate nation and losing the space race. At this time, it was near the start of the Cold War, the post-World War II power struggle between the U.S. and the USSR. While this satellite caused fear in the U.S., former astronaut Mike Mullane compared it to 9/11.
Sputnik was the 9/11 of our day. People were shocked that Russia had a technology that could do this, and we didn't.
It caused jubilation in the Soviet Union and its allied states. The Soviet Union also used the launch to develop a propaganda campaign to spread their political ideology across the globe to developing countries that had not yet chosen whether they would become capitalist or communist. The U.S., however, used the launch to further science and mathematics and education. Before we go into more detail about the space race and Sputnik, it is critical to understand what the space race was. The space race was a Cold War competition between the U.S. and its archenemy, the Soviet Union. The goal of this competition was to gain aeronautics and aerospace dominance. Before the space race, there was the missile race, where the U.S. and Soviet Union claimed World War II German rocket scientists, such as Wernher von Braun. And before that, there was the race to make the first nuclear bomb. President Eisenhower wanted to downplay the launch and not make a big deal about it. He said that this country has never been in a race and that it wasn't a big deal in a press conference with the New York Times. Part of the reason that he said it was not a big deal is that he was told earlier in a press conference with the CIA that the Russians would launch a satellite soon. The fact that the government knew that the Russians were about to launch a satellite remained a secret until 2017. Another reason for downplaying the launch was that he wanted to put spy satellites into orbit soon. Although the satellite did nothing other than beep, it caused nationwide concern. Senate Majority Leader Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat, played to those fears and pushed for large spending bills from Congress that developed NASA and the National Defense Education Act. He stated in a subcommittee summary statement that control of space means control of the world. This event truly opened the door to space when it kicked off the space race due to the panic it caused among American citizens. The launch of the Soviet satellite also caused a self-examination of the education system of the United States and much dissatisfaction towards many people in power, such as President Eisenhower.
Gets the American people alarmed that a foreign country, especially an enemy country, can do this.
Definitely alarming.
What do you think about America not being able to do the same?
Well, if I was in military service and fell down on a job like that, I could stand a court-martial. Somebody's fallen down on a job, badly.
The Navy was selected by the Department of Defense to launch Vanguard on December 6, 1957. Since there were many political benefits of sounding non-militaristic, the government chose the Navy in its rocket, even though the Army already had a fully operational ballistic missile. In fact, they were told to put sandbags in top of the launch vehicle so that they could not accidentally launch a satellite. The U.S.'s first attempt to launch a satellite was disastrous. Here is some footage from the launch.
Here are official Defense Department films of the launching of the 72-foot missile, a loss of thrust, and fall back to Earth in split seconds. is classified. Neither the satellite program nor our missile development is affected, said Acting Defense Secretary Quarles. It's only an incident in the perfection of the Vanguard satellite system.
It blew up spectacularly on the launch pad, gaining the name Sputnik. The Army was given 90 days to launch a satellite. At this point, the panic really started to set in. This failed launch increased the panic because people knew that the Soviet Union could launch a satellite, and yet the United States, the worldwide leader in technology and science, could not, was shocking to many people. After the Army was given the green light, they put a satellite into orbit in short order. The satellite was about 6 inches in diameter and was about 30 pounds. The Army used a Jupiter C rocket to launch Explorer 1 into orbit. Although it was launched successfully, it paled in comparison to Sputnik 2 that sent the first living being, a dog, Laika, into space. Although it was a brief victory for the US, the Soviet Union continued to get many more firsts, such as first man in space and first woman in space. Despite early Soviet victories for the space race, the US eventually beat them when they put a man on the moon on July 20th, 1969, and with the development of the Space Shuttle program on January 5th, 1972. Just as important as the technology developed in the space race was the Sputnik moment, the perceived fear of a technological gap. The self-examination of the education system of the United States was implemented by the public because they were afraid that the United States was falling behind after the launch of Sputnik, and politicians stroked that fear to use as leverage to pass large spending bills, even though they knew that we were not technologically behind.
Don't want to become hysterical, but let's become factual. Let's start telling the truth. And let's face the fact that we've taken a licking, psychologically at least, and scientifically, and it has embarrassed us throughout the world.
If Russia wins dominance of this completely new area, well, I think the consequences are fairly plain. Probable Soviet world domination.
What people found during the examination was a great disappointment. They found that as a direct cause of the baby boom after World War II, the American school system was bursting at the seams. As an effect of the large number of students, there was inadequate space, resources, and teachers. Because of the lack of teachers in space, the classrooms were full and at times unruly. Most of the teachers' time was spent on controlling the classroom rather than teaching. As an attempt to fix the numerous issues in the education system, there was a massive increase in school funding. This program was the National Defense Education Act. It was a $1 billion spending package. And, what has become quite rare in politics today, the bill passed with significant bipartisan support, with over half the opposing party in both chambers voting in favor of the bill. There were many new schools built as well as many new teachers hired. The increase in funding for math and science was a direct push to get more kids to become scientists and engineers because those were seen as the most important jobs of the time. Many schools also had official and unofficial rocketry clubs. Some of those clubs continued on to the present day, such as the one shown here in McKinley, Texas. Some of the long-term effects of the examination of the education system are student loads as well as increased workload for students. They started using hands-on laboratory experiments, and scientists helped develop the curriculum. It also caused a large increase in the number of school buildings and decreased the teacher-to-pupil ratio. Sputnik was one of those moments that changed everything. The effects were in all reaches of life, and we are still affected by the launch and the following events of the space race today. As Harvard researcher Madden said, Sputnik put a spotlight on a national problem: education. The technology developed during this time led to many modern-day technologies that are ever present in our lives today. Sputnik affected everyone, whether they were a teacher, a student, or a politician.